Hello, and welcome to this edition of Sex Offender Community Update, the program that provides news and information regarding the issue of sex offenders, as well as the names and faces of convicted Level 3 sex offenders residing in the greater Binghamton community. I'm your host, David Baker, and joining me on the program today to discuss some of these issues are two people with two very divergent points of view on how governments and communities should deal with the issue of sex offenders and notification. Reverend Dr. C. David Hess is the pastor of the West Henrietta Baptist Church in West Henrietta, New York. He's the New York State representative for So Hopeful International, an organization working around the country to reform Megan's Law. Although also with us today is Reverend Joseph Hein, a Presbyterian minister from Binghamton, who was instrumental in shepherding Megan's Law through the maze of the New York State Legislature back in 1996. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
I guess we should begin by asking how two people with similar religious backgrounds could arrive at such disparate positions when it comes to the issue of sex offenders and community notification. Let's start with you, Reverend Dr. Hess. What is So Hopeful International, and what led you to become involved with the mission of the organization?
First, let me say I'm not so sure that Reverend Hein and I will disagree all that much. Both of us want to have effective laws that keep our communities safe and keep our children safe. We might have some difference of opinion about which laws might most effectively do that. So Hopeful International is an organization which does work for safe communities. We want effective sex offender laws that do keep our communities and children safe. How I got involved: I know former victims of sexual abuse. I also know some former offenders and what they have had to go through in terms of rebuilding their lives. And I ultimately see that what is good for the former offender in terms of being able to rebuild their life, live successfully in the community, basically is also good for the community. If they can successfully rebuild their lives, that means there won't be another victim.
Dr. Hein, you've been involved with the issue of sex offenders and community notification for years. You've also been a strong advocate for Megan's Law and stiffer penalties for sex offenders. What was it that first drew you to this issue?
I came to this issue from a very personal point of view. I was director of Salvation Army's Open Door Youth Shelter for runaway children. And one of the children who were entrusted to us was molested by a man who had been 3 times previously convicted for molesting children, and now was charged and later convicted with his 4th conviction in molesting this young boy. When they raided his apartment, the police found thousands of pieces of information on how to recruit or befriend young people to molest. There were pornographic pictures, thousands of them from what I understand. I was enraged that a man who had abused children over a 40-year period only received a 2-year sentence, and decided at that point that it was important that I try to do something to change the laws to make them more strict, less permissive regarding sex offenders.
Reverend Dr. Hess, after hearing about the program in the media, you contacted us to express your concern that this program might actually be harmful in some way to sex offenders. What is so objectionable about using the reach of television to provide the community with information about Level 3 sex offenders who are classified by the state as the most dangerous and most likely to reoffend?
I might say that I'm not primarily concerned about harm to sex offenders. I'm primarily concerned about what laws will make our communities safer. And this is a complicated issue, and I'm not going to pretend that it is simple at all. There's a lot to be said for this particular television show. I think it's good for the community to be educated about this subject, but I want it to be fully understood by the community. Sometimes a little bit of information can be a dangerous thing, as we've heard. And sometimes we also have to know how to use the information that we have, and there can be dangers there. One of the dangers, I think, perhaps, that we might have with just people receiving a little bit of information is if we just have the idea that the primary danger to our children in terms of their being sexually abused is presented by this small group of people that we have identified as being sex offenders. Someone has said that the face of danger is more likely to be in a family snapshot than it is on a sex offender registry. I know we'll be getting into statistics and things later, but one estimate is that 95% of sex crimes are committed by someone who is not listed on a sex offender registry. And I know some in your audience may have seen the Dateline series on To Catch a Predator, where they set up a sting to lure people to have sex with underage young people. They lured them over the internet, and out of the first 130 perpetrators that they caught in that sting, only 4 were registered sex offenders. And so my concern is that we not be in a barn with our eye on the mouse hole to see what might be coming through that particular opening, and neglecting, you know, the barn door, which is standing wide open behind us, and not really paying any attention there. As I indicated before, the face of danger is much more likely to be in a family snapshot than it is on the sex offender registry.
And Reverend Hine, what is your response to that?
Well, I would disagree with Dr. Hess. The face of crime is a recidivist, someone who's reoffended many times within certain periods of time. One of the things that we'll discuss probably later in the show is how we measure recidivism. And so I would disagree with you in saying that the face of crime is found in a family snapshot. 1 in 7 crimes in the last 10 years are sex offense related crimes, not necessarily related to the family. So I think child abuse, sex offense are much more pervasive than quite inaccurate statistics. And I'm sure we'll have a deeper conversation about that in the time ahead.
Reverend Hess, is it really helpful to know that this is happening within families? Shouldn't the public be interested in this?
Well, again, the fears of the stranger who's going to molest our child, those are the rarest sort of offenses. Again, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, 93% of children who've been victimized sexually know their attacker well. They're either a family member or a close family friend. They're usually not strangers. And I agree with Reverend Hine that this crime that was committed years ago in Binghamton was a terrible crime. And I hope that the perpetrator is, punished severely. And So Hopeful believes in strong laws, and we believe that sex offenders should be punished. And I know that the fear that fills all parents the most is of these terrible criminals that abduct, sexually abuse, and murder children. But fortunately, this crime is very rare. Actually, just looking at the problem statistically, that twice as many children are killed in their own driveways being backed over by their parents with their minivan or SUV than are kidnapped and abducted by strangers. We need to keep it all in perspective.
Reverend Hine, don't most sexual predators know their victims before they attack?
Most do indeed know their victims. That doesn't mean that they would be in the family snapshot. They have some, and that's one of the things. I would just add to that children who are abused by those outside of the family isn't extremely rare. I would say that we don't know how much of it happens. All that we know is that it's grossly underreported. There's more of it than we think, and we have good reason. It's very rational to be afraid of those with sex offender history.